This is none of your business, grease monkey! It is now. Leave her alone.
You know, most people think that heroics are these loud, cinematic moments with swelling orchestral music and slow-motion camera angles. But I'm here to tell you that's a load of Hollywood garbage. Because real violence, the kind that changes the trajectory of your entire life in a heartbeat, it happens in the ugly quiet, in the spaces between breaths where the only soundtrack is the hum of a commercial refrigerator and the blood pounding in your ears. I was just a ghost back then. A nobody named Mason scrubbing congealed béarnaise sauce off porcelain plates in the back of the Obsidian. One of those high-end Manhattan joints where a salad costs more than my rent. And I liked it that way. Staying invisible, keeping my head down. Because when you've got a past like mine and a 6-year-old daughter with a heart condition waiting at home, invisibility isn't just a preference, it's a survival strategy. It was a Tuesday. Rainy, the kind of night that seeps into your bones, and I had just stepped out of the kitchen to bus a table near the back, when the air in the room suddenly changed. Shifted from the polite clinking of silverware to that heavy, static-charged silence that screams predator, and I looked up to see 3 guys, built like vending machines in tailored suits, boxing in a woman at the corner booth. I knew who she was. Everyone did. Serafina Sterling, the tech mogul who was currently eating the lunch of every old money CEO in the city, but right then, she didn't look like a titan of industry. She looked like a target, forcing her gaze to stay on her tablet, even as these guys neutralized her security detail with terrifying quiet efficiency. The leader, a guy with a neck tattoo creeping up his collar like a vine, leaned in, and I didn't need to hear the words to know the threat. I could see the violence radiating off him like heat off pavement, and something in me, that old switch I thought I'd buried in the desert sand a decade ago, it just flipped. I didn't think, I just moved, stepping out of the shadows with my hands still wet from the dishwater, my voice dropping into that command tone I hadn't used since my squad leader days, saying, "Step away from the table, gentlemen," and the leader turned, looking at me like I was a cockroach he'd forgotten to crush, smirking this ugly, arrogant smirk and saying, "Go back to your sud bucket, busboy. The adults are talking." That was his first mistake, thinking the apron defined the man, because he turned his back on me to grab Seraphine's arm, and that's when the world sped up and slowed down, all at once. I grabbed a stack of heavy ceramic chargers from the service station, the kind that weigh about 3 pounds each, and I spun, slinging the first one like a discus, and it caught the guy on the left right in the temple cracky, went down like a sack of cement. No sound, just gravity taking over. The second guy, the big one on the right, he lunged for me, reaching for a holster under his jacket, but I was already moving, flowing like water. Grabbing a cast iron skillet from the cart we used them for tableside fajitas and I swung it backhand, catching his kneecap with a sickening crunch that made half the dining room gasp. He dropped, howling, and now it was just me and the leader. The guy with the tattoo, and the arrogance was gone from his eyes, replaced by that flicker of fear you see when a bully realizes he picked the wrong victim. He swung a wild haymaker, sloppy, desperate, and I just stepped inside his guard, driving my shoulder into his sternum, pinning him against a marble pillar, and in the scuffle, his hand clawed at my neck, snagging the silver chain I never took off, and snapped. The metal gave way, sending my pendant skittering across the floor to land right at Seraphine's feet. Time stopped. I swear it did, because she looked down, her eyes locking onto that piece of metal, a jagged, broken half of a 1922-piece dollar, worn smooth by my thumb over 1,000 sleepless nights, and the color drained from her face so fast I thought she was going to faint. She wasn't looking at a piece of jewelry, she was looking at a ghost story, a legend her father, Old Man Sterling, had told her on his deathbed about a medic in Fallujah who dragged him through a mile of burning streets, a kid who had a matching half of that silver dollar. I saw the recognition in her eyes, Bashaka, her mouth forming the word "you," and panic, cold and sharp, pierced through my adrenaline because recognition was the one thing I couldn't afford. Not with the enemies I had, not with Lily to protect. I didn't wait for a thank you, didn't wait for the police. I just shoved the leader to the ground, turned on my heel, and sprinted through the kitchen, grabbing my backpack and ducking out the back alley exit where the rain washed the sweat off my face. I had to get to Lily. I had to pack. We had to burn this life to the ground and run. Because I knew guys like that leader, mercenaries, hired by corporate sharks like Declan Voss. Seraphine's rival, they don't forgive humiliation, and they certainly don't leave witnesses. I grabbed Lily from the sitter's place, told her we were going on a surprise adventure, trying to keep my voice steady while my hands shook on the steering wheel of my rusted-out pickup truck, driving north, always north, towards the dense pine forests of the Pacific Northwest where a man can disappear if he knows how to be quiet. But here's the thing about rich people. They think everything is a transaction, a balance sheet to be reconciled. So while I was running for my life, Serafina was mobilizing her own private army, led by this guy named Garrison, a former spook with eyes like flint, telling him to find me, not to hurt me, but to pay a debt she felt she owed.
But she wasn't the only one hunting. Declan Voss, the guy who sent the thugs, he was sitting in his glass tower, furious that a dishwasher had embarrassed him. And he unleashed his own hound, a psychopath named Graves who didn't care about debts or honor, only about leverage. I found this cabin in a town called Pinaview, a forgotten speck on the map, no internet, no cell service, just trees and silence, and for a few days, I thought we were safe. I thought we could breathe. Lily was happy, chasing butterflies, building forts out of sticks, and for a moment, I let my guard down. I let myself believe that the war was over. But the universe has a twisted sense of humor, because on the fourth morning, I went to give Lily her meds beta blockers for her heart condition, and the bottle was light. Too light. I poured them out, my hand trembling, counting 1, 2, 3 pills. 3 days left, that was it, and panic, real panic, not the combat kind but the father kind, clawed at my throat. I couldn't go to the local clinic, small towns talk. A stranger needing specialized pediatric heart meds would light up the gossip, mill faster than a flare, so I had to make a run to the city, to a big pharmacy where I could be anonymous, or so I thought. I drove 2 hours to Seattle, walked into a CVS, used my real name because I had to for the prescription history, and the moment that pharmacist hit enter on her keyboard, a digital tripwire triggered in a server room 300 miles away. Voss's data miners were watching everything: credit cards, DMV records, pharmacy databases, and just like that, the beacon was lit. I was walking back to my truck, clutching that white paper bag like it was the Holy Grail, feeling this wave of relief, thinking I'd dodged a bullet, but I didn't know that the bullet was already in the air. I got back to the cabin as the sun was setting, casting these long, jagged shadows across the yard. And the birds had stopped singing. That's the first sign, always. Nature goes quiet before the violence starts. I rushed inside, locked the door, and pulled Lily into a hug, but the hair on the back of my neck stood up. That sixth sense screaming, they're here. I peeked through the dusty curtains and saw movement in the tree line. Shadows detaching themselves from the darkness, a tactical team, professional, moving with silence and precision, circling the cabin like wolves. I grabbed the only weapon I had, a heavy fireplace poker, and shoved Lily under the bed, telling her to play the quiet game, the most important game of her life, and I stood there in the center of that drafty room, heart hammering against my ribs, waiting for the breach. But just as the first boot hit the porch step, a sound cracked through the valley, not a door kicking in, but the sharp, thunderous report of a high-caliber sniper rifle from the ridge above us. That gunshot wasn't meant to kill. It blew the porch light fixture into 1,000 sparkling shards, raining glass down on the tactical team and sending them scrambling for cover, confused, shouting into their comms because they thought they were hunting a mouse and suddenly realized there was a hawk circling overhead. I didn't know who pulled the trigger, friend, foe, or just a crazy local, but I knew an opportunity when I saw one. So I grabbed Lily, threw her over my shoulder, and kicked out the back window, tumbling us into the damp ferns and mud behind the cabin. We ran. God, we ran, my lungs burning like I was inhaling broken glass, dragging my little girl through briars and creek beds, hearing the shouts of the mercenaries behind us as they regrouped. Graves, the hunter Voss sent, he wasn't stupid. He split his team, sending 2 guys to suppress the mystery sniper and taking the other to detract me. And he was fast, relentless, a machine made for this exact scenario. Lily was crying, soft, terrified whimpers that tore my heart out. But I couldn't stop. I had to get us to high ground, to the old fire watchtower on Sentinel Ridge, a place I'd scouted on day 1. A steel skeleton jutting out of the rock face that offered the only defensive position in 10 miles. We hit the base of the tower just as the moon broke through the clouds, illuminating us like a spotlight, and a bullet pinged off the steel railing inches from my head, followed by the crack of a suppressed rifle. I shoved Lily up the stairs, screaming at her to climb, and I turned, grabbing a rusted shovel that had been leaning against the base, wielding it like a battle axe. The first mercenary came out of the tree line, confident, thinking he had me cornered, and he raised his weapon. But he didn't account for the sniper. Another shot rang out from the darkness, hitting the dirt right at his feet, forcing him to dive behind a boulder. That sniper was Garrison. Serafina's man, though I didn't know it yet. He was playing shepherd, herding the wolves away from us, picking them off or pinning them down, giving me just enough time to scramble up those rattling stairs and barricade the trapdoor of the tower's cabin. We were trapped 80 feet in the air, with a glass box for a shield and a team of killers below. But then the shooting stopped, and a strange, heavy silence settled over the mountain, the kind of silence that feels like a held breath. I peered over the edge and saw a man walking out of the woods. Hands raised, unarmed. It was Garrison, looking like a college professor who'd gotten lost on a hike. Except for the calm, deadly way he moved, he walked right up to the base of the tower, ignoring the mercenaries who were groaning on the ground, and he called up to me, his voice carrying clearly in the night air. "Mason, I'm not here to fight you. Serafina sent me. She wants to balance the ledger." And then, a minute later, a Land Rover came tearing up the fire road, headlights cutting through the gloom, and out stepped Serafina herself, wearing a trench coat over her business suit, looking completely out of place and yet fiercely determined. She climbed those stairs, unarmed, while Garrison held the perimeter, and when she reached the top, she didn't look at me like a busboy. She looked at me like an equal. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the other half of that silver dollar, her father's half, and held it out, her hand trembling just slightly. "My father told me that the man who held this saved his soul," she said, her voice fighting the wind. "He said if I ever found you, I was to give you the world. Name your price, Mason. A house in the Alps, a trust fund for Lily, a new identity. I can make you disappear so thoroughly that even God won't find you. Just say the word, and the debt is paid." I looked at that coin, then I looked at Lily, who was huddled in the corner wrapped in a dusty blanket, shivering, her eyes wide with trauma that would take years to heal. I looked back at Serafina, and I felt this cold, hard clarity settle in my chest, realizing that running wasn't freedom. It was just a longer hallway in the same prison. "I don't want your money," I told her, and I saw the shock register on her face. "I don't want a hideout. You think Voss is going to stop? You think a new name will keep my daughter safe from men like Graves? No, I don't want to hide anymore." I stepped closer, the rusted metal grating creaking under my boots. "You want to pay the debt? Then help me finish this. You have the money, the influence, the lawyers. I have the tactics, the dirt, and the will to do what needs to be done. We don't run. We hunt." A slow smile spread across Serafina's face, a dangerous, razor-sharp expression that reminded me why she was the CEO of a billion-dollar empire. "Partner?" she asked, extending her hand. I took it, and it felt like striking a match in a room full of gasoline. The next 3 months were a blur of calculated warfare. We didn't use guns, we used information. I coordinated with Garrison to map out Voss's entire operation, while Serafina unleashed a team of forensic accountants that made the FBI look like mall cops. We leaked evidence of his offshore accounts, his illegal data mining, his hiring of mercenaries. Piece by piece, dismantling his life with surgical precision. We watched from a distance as the feds raided his office, dragging Voss out in handcuffs, looking small and pathetic without his expensive suit to hide behind. 6 months later, I was sitting on a bench in Central Park, watching Lily run through the grass, laughing, actually laughing, her cheeks pink and healthy. Serafina sat down next to me, handing me a coffee, no words needed, just a quiet presence. I wasn't a dishwasher anymore, and I wasn't a ghost. I was the head of her personal security, living in the light, walking tall, back in her office, on a velvet cushion inside a bulletproof glass case. Those two halves of the silver dollar sat side by side, not welded together, but resting, touching, a reminder that broken things can still be whole, that two different worlds can collide and create something unbreakable. It makes you think, doesn't it, about what we owe each other. Not money, not favors, but the basic human duty to step in when the wolves are circling. Most people would have taken the check and run to the Alps, and I wouldn't have blamed them. But sometimes, the only way to truly save yourself is to stop running and turn around to fight. So, I gotta ask you, if you were standing in that kitchen, hearing the threat, seeing the fear, would you have thrown that plate? Would you have risked everything for a stranger? Or would you have kept your head down and kept scrubbing? It's an easy question to answer now, in the safety of your room, but in the moment, man, in the moment, it's the hardest choice in the world. Let me know what you would have done in the comments below. Stay safe out there, and remember, watch your six.